Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. As our good friend Emperor Brohm likes to say, we are back here at Gridiron Expert headquarters bringing you our Week 12 recap. And Week 12 of college football was supposed to be somewhat of a dead week. Not many great, exciting games or anything like that. College game day was going down to Orlando for a thriller between Cincinnati and Central Florida. But Week 12 turned out to be one of the better weeks of college football, I think. In my opinion, we saw our fair share of exciting games, our fair share of upsets, seeing 5 teams in the top 25 lose, but only 2 of those coming to unranked teams, and those were Florida State upsetting Boston College. Even though that game was in Tallahassee, Florida State keeping their potential for going to a bowl and keeping that bowl streak alive with that win over the Eagles. Going to have to beat the Gators in Week 13 if they want to keep that streak alive, and then seeing an absolute thriller with Oklahoma State upsetting West Virginia, absolutely ruining the Mountaineers' college football playoff hopes, still keeping their Big 12 title hopes alive, but taking them out of the college football playoff race. And we'll start there with our recap. Oklahoma State coming back from 17 down. Taylor Cornelius, the week before against Oklahoma, had thrown for 501 yards, and they nearly upset Oklahoma, only losing that game by 1 point when they went for 2 and failed. Come back home, beat West Virginia, the number 9 team in the nation. Taylor Cornelius throws for 338 yards and 5 touchdowns. So great, solid performances by Cornelius for the Cowboys these past couple of weeks. That clinched bowl eligibility for Oklahoma State, have a chance to finish the year with 7 wins, maybe 8, with a win in the bowl game. But West Virginia was up by 10 in that game with 7 minutes and 47 seconds remaining. Oklahoma State keeping their composure, winning the game in the final minute, and then shutting down West Virginia on that final drive. They had one last chance from inside, I think the 25-yard line to win the game, and just couldn't get the job done. So an absolute thriller there, probably the best game, I think, of Week 12. But the best competition to being the best game of Week 12 was when Ohio State had to go on the road to face Maryland, what would have been probably one of the biggest upsets of the entire college football season. Ohio State surviving that game 52-51 in overtime. And Maryland should have won this game. Maryland controlled the game the entire time. Anthony McFarland, 21 carries, 298 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Absolutely scorching that Buckeyes defense. They get to overtime. Matt Canada, who's serving as interim head coach for the Terrapins right now, decides to go for 2, and Tyrell Pigrome to Deshaun Jones was wide open in the end zone to clinch the winner for the Terrapins, and Tyrell Pigrome just absolutely missed him. He was wide open, not a Buckeye defender around him, and just overthrew him, or actually he was actually off to the side a little bit, just completely missed that throw. Many people could have made that throw. So an absolute killer for the Terrapins, and a blessing for Ohio State, who now has a date against Michigan. The winner of that game going to the Big Ten championship game against Northwestern, and potentially going to the college football playoff. So, Ohio State certainly has a lot of work to do to get scorched by that Maryland team, to nearly lose to that Maryland team, but they're keeping their playoff hopes and Big Ten title hopes alive, and what was an absolute thriller there. Notre Dame, what was probably the biggest game of Week 12, playing against I believe it's 12, Syracuse, taking absolute care of the Orange 36-3, and a lot of people could make the excuse that Eric Dungey did get hurt in that game, so maybe that's why Notre Dame took care of business. I think they were going to take care of business from the start, and Syracuse had played a pretty good amount of time this season without Dungey at quarterback, so you can't make that excuse saying that they were inexperienced without him. So I was very impressed with the Fighting Irish there. I think they looked like the best of those top 4 teams in Week 12. Washington State, the number 8 team in the country, putting off 55 first-half points against Arizona. And I know it's just Arizona, but anytime your offense can put up that type of production, just one half, extremely scary to think about. So Washington State still has an outside chance of getting into the college football playoff, hoping to keep those hopes alive in the Apple Cup against Washington, and then in the Pac-12 championship game. And then finally, before we dive into our official recap, think about the top 4 teams right now. Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Michigan. All 4 of these teams played in Week 12, and I have to say that Notre Dame looked like the best team out of those top 4. If you think about it, Alabama was tied at 10 with the Citadel at half. Yes, they ended up running away with that game, only allowing the Citadel to score 7 more points the rest of the game. Still a very sluggish start, and that was kind of the trend here for these top 4 teams. Sluggish starts in Week 12. Clemson was only up 14-6 at halftime against Duke, ended up winning that game 35-6, but still a very slow start for the Tigers. And then Michigan actually down at home 17-15 to Indiana before ending up winning that game 31-20. They should have won that game by a lot more. I believe the spread in that game was 28 points for the Wolverines. So 3 of the top 4 teams had very sluggish starts before pulling away and winning, all by double digits, but still have a lot of work to do to kind of solidify themselves into the college football playoff. They got conference championship games and rivalry week coming up, so a lot of work coming along the way. But Notre Dame looked like the best team out of those top 4 in Week 12. Overall, a very solid record. Back-to-back solid weeks for us straight up. 28-9 on the week. 75.7%, so 76 if you want to round up. Overall, we're 351-115, 75.3% winning percentage. Last year, at the end of the year, it was 75.5, so we're 0.2% off from where we were at the end of the season last year, so there's a chance we could actually improve on that and finish right at 76% if you round up, which has been our goal the entire year. So not a horrible place to be right now. We still got a couple weeks left to improve on that. Against the spread, another decent week, not great, but still below 500, 3-5, 37.5%. That's usually been the trend. We're 3-5, 4-4, or 5-3. Rarely have we cracked the 6-2, 7-1 mark. I think we've only done that a handful of times, but we've never done worse than 3-5. So we're right there, about average overall, 64-55. 53.8% there, 54% if you want to round up. And depending on where you look, sometimes 50% is where you need to be, sometimes it's 52%. But we're hoping to stay above 500 on the year, and I think we will achieve that goal when the season ends here in a couple of weeks. Teams trending up. Before you start asking a lot of questions, why we have a 4-7 team that's on here trending up, hear me out. Nebraska struggled under Scott Frost. If you remember, this was a Nebraska team that we were talking about a couple weeks ago, maybe not winning a single game on the year, maybe finishing 1-11, one of the worst seasons, if not the worst season in Nebraska football history. People were starting to question if Scott Frost really was the right man for the job. They're 4-7 right now. They won 4 of their last 5. That lone loss in that 5-game span by 5 points to Ohio State. They also lost to Northwestern a week before they started that winning streak in overtime. Northwestern, of course, playing for the Big Ten championship game, and they should have beaten Colorado and Troy early on in the season. This is a much better Nebraska team than their record indicates at 4-7. If they beat Iowa in the season finale, they would be 5-7. Would still miss out on a bowl game, but you can carry that momentum into next year. We've seen that every year. There's one team that finishes the season strong, might not even make the postseason, but they can carry that momentum and that positivity into the next season, and they end up starting off pretty quick and pretty strong. And I think that's what's happening with Nebraska here. So give a lot of credit for Scott Frost for keeping his troops rallied, for not giving up on the year. They're sitting here at 4-7, but winning 4 of their last 5. I think a very impressive feat in my opinion. We got Missouri here, who also, like Nebraska, has won 4 of their past 5. They're sitting at 7-4. That lone loss here in that 5-game span, a 1-point loss in controversial fashion to Kentucky, 15-14. We all remember how that game ended. Kentucky getting that one last untimed down and won the game on that final play. But they're 7-4 right now. Should take easy care of Arkansas in the final week of the season. So there's a chance Missouri could finish the year with 9 wins, and that would be extremely impressive for Barry Odom and his squad. Remember where this Missouri team was just a few years ago and how Barry Odom has turned his team around. So they could finish with a 9-4 record on the year. Extremely impressive for him. And then Army, 9-2, has won 7 straight games. And Army was on our trending up board just a few weeks ago, and I want to put them back up here because they absolutely deserve it. Army has the chance to win 11 games this season. Navy has struggled mightily this season, so Army should be able to win that game. They'd be 10-2, win their bowl game, they're 11-2. So give a lot of credit to what Jeff Monken has done. Their last loss coming in overtime to Oklahoma way early in the season, 28-21. Army was not a team that I expect to see this kind of effort out of, these kind of results out of this season. So a great coaching effort by Jeff Monken and this Army squad, especially after losing some key starters from last season. Come over here to teams trending down, and just FYI, this will be the last week that we do teams up, trending down and trending up. This is going to be the last week we do that. By the end of next week, the regular season will be over. We'll be entering conference championship week and then postseason. So this will be the last week for that. But of course, our videos are not going to stop. We'll still address all the college football teams, at least all the Power 5 teams. But we got Louisville over here sitting at 2-9, has lost 8 straight, as we all know, fired head coach Bobby Petrino. And you really just come to see how important Lamar Jackson was for this Cardinal squad. The kind of role that he played for Louisville during his, 3 years there? It truly is unbelievable how big a difference one player can make. Louisville struggling across the board, offensively, defensively, even on special teams. Sitting at 2-9 right now, they're going to have to make some huge strides forward in the offseason. The potential of getting Jeff Brohm from Purdue, though, that would be a huge get at the head coaching position there. We got Texas Tech, another potential head coaching change here. I've said early in the offseason, I've said it all year long, that if Cliff Kingsbury can't get Texas Tech to a bowl game, he will be out as head coach, and there's a chance that could happen. Texas Tech, just a few weeks ago, was sitting at 5-2. Things were looking great. They were technically still in the hunt for the Big 12 championship game, and now have lost 4 straight. And some of those in heartbreaking fashion, by 9 points to Iowa State, by 5 points to Oklahoma, by 7 points to Texas in the final seconds. They're sitting at 5-6 right now, have a date against Baylor. Winner of that goes to the postseason. The winner of that, loser of that, stays home. Cliff Kingsbury has to win this game to get Texas Tech there, and even with that win, might still be out as head coach of the Red Raiders, especially with such a disappointing finish. And then finally, Ole Miss, they can't go to any postseason games, we know that, but they were still sitting at 5-2 after a very narrow win over Arkansas. And since that Arkansas game, they have lost 4 straight. They have lost to Auburn, Texas A&M, South Carolina, and most recently Vanderbilt in an absolute crusher in overtime. And say what you might about that touchdown pass, I believe it was, for Ole Miss. It was an incomplete pass. They called it an incomplete pass, but a very controversial ending in overtime, I have to say, down in there in Nashville. But regardless, Ole Miss sitting at 5-6 right now. They beat Mississippi State, which I don't think they will. They finished 6-6. Still a very solid record for Matt Luke and his squad. Next year they can take some steps forward and try to get back to postseason play after all these bans are over. But it's looking like another 5-7 year for Ole Miss. But that's to be expected. Matt Luke, this is the first year that the interim tag has been removed from his name, and I got to really give him a lot of credit for the effort that Ole Miss has put forth in all of their games this season, keeping that morale up despite having really nothing to play for except for pride. But Ole Miss trending down after losing 4 straight. We'll see how their season ends in the Egg Bowl. So our Week 12 recap sitting here right now. We got a full week of college football for Week 13, starting I think on Wednesday night and carrying all the way through Saturday. So make sure you keep your eye on that. We're going to have videos coming out on those Week 13 predictions and our college football playoff ranking analysis. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that because we are nearing the end of the college football season, and we know that in rivalry week, anything is possible and chaos might happen in the college football playoffs. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. As always, go check us out on Twitter for potential prediction changes and spread picks, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.